shamed publicly, labeled a gold digger. Her billionaire CEO accused her of trapping him with twins he claimed were never his. But when the truth finally surfaced, everything changed, and the internet couldn't look away. The phone rang at 3 in the morning. Adrian Whitmore stared at the unknown number glowing in the darkness of his penthouse bedroom. He almost didn't answer, almost let it go to voicemail like he did with everything that interrupted his carefully ordered life. But something made his hand reach out. Something made him press accept. Hello. Silence. Then breathing. Then a voice he hadn't heard in 8 years. A voice that still haunted his dreams and his regrets. Adrian, I need to tell you something about 18 years ago. His heart stopped. Actually stopped for one terrible moment before slamming back to life. Margot. Her voice came through the phone like shattered glass, sharp and cutting and desperate. I wouldn't call if there was any other option. I need you to listen without interrupting. Can you do that? He couldn't speak. Could only make a sound that might have been yes or might have been a gasp. When I left you, I was pregnant. 2 months. I didn't know at the time. I found out 3 weeks after the divorce was final. The world tilted. Adrian gripped the edge of his bed, his knuckles white. You have sons. Twins. Their names are Caleb and Joshua. They're 17 and they're dying. The words came like bullets, each one hitting vital organs. They have a genetic heart condition. Came from you. Their hearts are failing and the only treatment that can save them requires stem cells from their biological father. I need you to come to City General Hospital. I need you to be tested. I need you to help save the children you never knew existed. Adrian's voice broke when he finally found it. I have sons. Yes, you have sons. And I kept them from you for 18 years because you accused me of betrayal without proof. You threw me out of your house. You chose suspicion over love. So yes, I kept them from that. I kept them from you. The accusation hung in the air between them, separated by miles but connected by this impossible truth. You should have told me. So you could look at them with the same doubt you looked at me. So you could poison them with your paranoia. So they could grow up knowing their father thought their mother was a whore. He flinched at the word, at the accuracy of what he'd believed, what he'd told the world. Are they? He couldn't finish the question. They're in ICU. One of them collapsed during a basketball game. The other has the same condition in early stages. Without treatment, they'll both be dead within months. Maybe weeks. Adrian stood abruptly. His entire body was shaking. I'm coming. Right now. I'll drive. No. Her voice turned sharp as a blade. You'll hire a car service. You'll arrive sober and rational because if you show up intoxicated or emotional and disturb my sons while they're fighting for their lives, I will have security remove you and your cells be damned. I will find another way. Do you understand? Yes. City General, main entrance. Ask for Dr. Reeves in cardiology. He's expecting you. She paused and he heard something crack in her controlled facade. Adrian, I'm not asking for us. I'm not asking for forgiveness or explanations or anything to do with what you destroyed. I'm asking for them. They're innocent in all of this. They deserve to live. I know. Do you? Because once you walk through those hospital doors, you can't unsee them. You can't pretend they don't exist. They're real, Adrian. They're brilliant and kind and everything good that we might have been together. And if you help save them and then disappear back to your mansion, I will make sure they never forgive you for that abandonment either. I won't disappear. You don't get to make promises anymore. You lost that right when you called me a liar and threw me away. Her voice finally broke. Just come. Just be tested. Just do this one thing right in the middle of everything you did wrong. The line went dead. Have you ever been so desperate that you'd crawl back to the person who hurt you most? Have you ever watched the entire world believe a lie about you and there was nothing, absolutely nothing you could do to stop it? Have you ever had to choose between your pride and your children's lives? Margot Kane knew all of these feelings intimately. 8 years ago, a billionaire CEO stood before cameras and declared with absolute certainty that the twins she carried were not his. That she was a manipulative woman who'd tried to trap him into marriage through pregnancy. That DNA tests had proven her deception. Except there had never been DNA tests, just his word against hers. And the world chose him. Of course they did. Adrian Whitmore was young, charismatic, a tech genius who'd revolutionized cloud security and built a billion-dollar empire before he turned 30. His face was on magazine covers. His opinions were treated as gospel. He moved through the world with the kind of confidence that only unlimited resources can provide. Margot was a social worker who made $40,000 a year and drove a car held together by hope and duct tape. When it came down to his truth versus hers, there was never really a contest. If you've ever felt powerless against someone more powerful, this story is for you. Hit that like button if you're ready for a story about justice, second chances, and the moment the internet finally got it right. And subscribe, because what happens next will restore your faith that truth, even buried for years, eventually surfaces. This gets wild, and you're going to want to see how it ends. But to understand how Margot ended up making that 3 a.m. phone call, begging the man who destroyed her to save the children he denied, we need to go back. Back to before the accusation, before the divorce, before everything shattered into pieces too small to recognize. Back to when they were happy. Margot Kane met Adrian Whitmore at a community fundraiser on a Tuesday evening in April. She'd been working the volunteer table, signing people up for the new women's shelter program, wearing a dress that probably cost less than the appetizers being passed around on silver trays. But she'd been magnetic anyway, not because of beauty alone, though she was stunning, with dark skin that seemed to glow under the venue lights and eyes that actually listened when people spoke. Adrian had been there out of obligation. His PR team insisted he maintain a charitable image. Show up, write a check, smile for photos, leave. He'd perfected the routine. But then he'd seen her laugh at something an elderly volunteer said, her whole body participating in the joy, and he'd forgotten the routine entirely. He'd approached her table. Tell me about the shelter program. She'd looked up at him, this man in a suit that cost more than her monthly rent, and she hadn't been impressed. Hadn't gone starry-eyed or nervous. She'd just launched into a passionate explanation about helping women rebuild shattered lives, about dignity and support and community. He'd listened to every word. 3 hours later, they were still talking. The fundraiser had ended. The venue was closing. They'd moved to a coffee shop that stayed open late, sitting across from each other with cooling cups neither of them drank. Just talking. You're not what I expected, he'd said. What did you expect? Someone interested in my money. She'd smiled, sad and knowing. Your money is a tool, not a personality. I'm more interested in what you do with it than how much you have. He'd fallen in love with her in that moment. Didn't know it yet, wouldn't have named it that, but looking back, that was when it happened. Their courtship scandalized his circle. His attorney said the words prenuptial agreement 17 times in one conversation. His mother had actually staged an intervention, sitting him down with concerned eyes and careful words. Adrian, darling, are you certain about this? She comes from a very different world. That's what I love about her. Love. His mother had flinched at the word. You barely know her. I know enough. I know she sees me, not my bank account. I know she works with women in crisis and comes home with stories that remind me the world is bigger than quarterly returns. I know when she folds my shirts, she does it like she loves me, even though we have people for that. His mother had studied him for a long moment. And when this ends badly, when you discover she was playing a very long game, will you remember how certain you were? It won't end badly. But it had. Spectacularly, publicly, with enough destruction to last a lifetime. They'd married in a small ceremony that disappointed everyone. His family wanted something grand befitting his status. Her friends thought she was making a mistake, jumping into wealth without protection. But Adrian and Margot hadn't cared. They'd stood in front of a judge and 20 people who actually mattered, and they'd promised forever. For 2 years, forever had felt possible. Margot had refused to quit her work at the crisis center despite Adrian's offers to fund any project she wanted. I need to be useful, she'd explained. Not comfortable. Useful. She'd turned their mansion into a home, filled it with laughter and terrible cooking experiments and her habit of dancing in the kitchen to music only she could hear. She'd dragged him to community events he would have avoided, introduced him to people who needed help he could actually provide, reminded him constantly that wealth was a responsibility, not just a privilege. Adrian had never been happier. The morning it all started to end began like any other. Margot had been moving through their bedroom with that particular grace that had first caught his attention, humming something soft, some melody from her childhood she never quite remembered the name of. "You don't have to do that," Adrian had said from the bed, watching her fold his shirts with careful precision. "We have people for that." She turned, her smile radiant. "Your people fold like they're angry at fabric. I fold like I love you." That was Margot. She had a way of turning mundane moments into poetry. "What are you thinking about?" she'd asked, catching him staring. "That I'm the luckiest man breathing." Flatterer. She'd come to the bed, kissed his forehead. "I have a community meeting this morning. Budget discussions for the new shelter program. Take the car. Take the driver, please." She'd laughed. "Adrian, I'm going 6 blocks. I'll walk like a normal human being." Normal. That word again. Margot had a way of keeping him grounded, of reminding him that wealth was a tool, not an identity. He'd left for his office an hour later, kissing her goodbye at the door, like he'd done 1,000 mornings before. He had no way of knowing it would be the last morning that simple gesture would ever feel innocent. The envelope arrived at noon. Adrian's assistant brought it in with his lunch, looking uncomfortable. This came by courier, marked confidential. Inside were photographs, not explicit but damning in their intimacy. Margot sitting in a coffee shop with a man Adrian didn't recognize. The angle suggested they were holding hands across the table, though the image was grainy enough to be ambiguous. Another photo showed them walking together in a park, the man's hand seemingly on her lower back. A third caught them outside a hotel mid-conversation, standing too close. Adrian's hands trembled as he stared at the images. The accompanying letter was typed, anonymous. "Your wife isn't who you think she is. These meetings have been happening for months. Thought you deserved to know before you're made a complete fool." His chest constricted. He told himself there had to be an explanation. Margot had never given him a single reason to doubt her. Their marriage was solid. They were happy. But the photos sat on his desk like accusations, and his mind began constructing narratives he didn't want to believe. He called his business partner, Lawrence, who came immediately. Lawrence looked at the photos and shook his head slowly. "Adrian, I hate to say this, but I've seen this before. My brother went through the exact same thing. There could be an explanation. Of course there could be. But you need to ask yourself something." Lawrence leaned forward, his voice dropping to something that sounded like concern but tasted like poison. A woman from her background, suddenly living in luxury. No prenup protecting you. What if this whole thing was strategic? What if she's been playing you from the start? The poison worked slowly, seeping into thoughts that had been clear just hours before. Adrian tried calling Margot, but she didn't answer. She was in her meeting, phones silenced like always, but his mind, infected now with suspicion, interpreted her silence as evasion. More photos arrived the next day. Then a copy of a restaurant receipt with a handwritten note at the bottom that said tonight was perfect. The handwriting looked similar to Margot's, though Adrian couldn't be certain. He stopped sleeping, stopped eating. He hired a private investigator who came back with reports of regular meetings, always at discreet locations, always with the same man. The investigator couldn't confirm infidelity, but he couldn't rule it out either. Circumstantial evidence piled up like kindling waiting for a match. When Adrian finally confronted Margot, he'd been awake for 40 hours, marinating in betrayal he'd convinced himself was real. She'd been reading in their bedroom, curled in her chair by the window, completely unaware of the storm about to hit. "Who is he?" Margot looked up from her book, confused. "Who is who?" "The man you've been meeting." "Don't lie to me, Margot. I have photographs." The color drained from her face. Not from guilt, Adrian would realize years too late, but from shock. From the horror of being accused of something she hadn't done. "What are you talking about?" He threw the envelope at her feet. She picked it up slowly, her hands shaking as she looked through the images. When she looked back up at him, there were tears in her eyes. "Adrian, this is Malcolm. He's a social worker I've been collaborating with on the shelter project. These photos make it look like something it's not. Then why didn't you tell me about him? I did. I've mentioned Malcolm a dozen times. You never ask details because you're not interested in my work. You smile and nod and then go back to your phone. The accuracy of that observation should have stopped him. Should have made him recognize his own failures as a husband. But pride, that ancient poison, was already coursing through his veins. So it's my fault you're sneaking around. I'm not sneaking around. We have public meetings about public projects. Adrian, look at me. She stood, moving toward him, her hands outstretched. You know me. You know I would never. I don't know anything anymore. His voice broke on the words. All I know is my wife has been meeting another man for months, keeping it quiet. And now there are photos of you two looking very comfortable together. Because we're friends. Colleagues. That's what adults do, Adrian. We work together without it meaning something sordid. But he couldn't hear her. The doubt had roots now, deep and thorny, wrapped around his thoughts until he couldn't separate paranoia from reality. The divorce proceedings were brutal. Adrian had resources, connections, attorneys who could make things disappear or appear as needed. Margot had her dignity and the truth, neither of which held much weight in legal warfare. She tried reasoning with him one last time, appearing at his office unannounced. Adrian, please, just listen to me for 5 minutes. Without your attorneys or your pride in the room. I have nothing to say to you. Then just listen. Her voice cracked. I love you. I have only ever loved you. I don't know who sent those photos or why they're trying to destroy us, but I swear on everything sacred that I have never been unfaithful. Not once. Not ever. Malcolm is a colleague. A friend. That's all. And if you would just investigate properly instead of assuming the worst, you'd know that. He looked at her, and for one brief moment he saw his wife. The woman who folded his shirts with love, who made their mansion a home, who laughed with her whole body. But then Lawrence's voice echoed in his head. A woman from her background, suddenly living in luxury. I want you out by Friday. Take your clothes. Everything else stays. Adrian. Friday. She left his office, and that should have been the end of it. But that night, as Adrian sat alone in the house that suddenly felt cavernous, Margot returned one final time. She stood in the doorway, small and devastated, wearing the same dress she'd worn the night he proposed. I came to tell you something. Not to change your mind, because clearly your mind is made of stone now, but because you deserve to know the truth about what you're throwing away. I don't want to hear it. I'm done fighting. I'm done begging. I'm leaving, Adrian. I'm leaving you and your mansion and your suspicion and your pride. But I want you to know that years from now, when you finally discover you were wrong, when you finally learn there was never anyone else, you'll have to live with what you destroyed. She pulled off her wedding ring, set it on the marble floor between them, and walked away. Adrian stood frozen, listening to her footsteps echo through the house. He heard the front door open, heard it close. He stood watching through the window as she walked down the long driveway in bare feet because she'd kicked off her heels. One hand pressed against her stomach in a gesture he didn't understand. Behind her, his mansion blazed with lights. Ahead of her, only darkness. And in that moment, Adrian Whitmore, who had built an empire on calculated risks, realized too late that the only gamble that truly mattered was the one he'd just catastrophically lost. But what he didn't see, what he couldn't possibly know, was that Margot Kane was walking away carrying more than her broken heart. She was carrying 2 pieces of him that would grow into the only second chance he'd ever get. But Adrian didn't just let her go quietly. He made sure the world knew his version first. His PR team worked overnight. By morning, the story was everywhere. Billionaire tech CEO Adrian Whitmore announced today that he is divorcing his wife of 2 years, Margot Kane, citing irreconcilable differences. Sources close to Whitmore reveal that Kane had allegedly been carrying on an affair with a colleague, leading to the breakdown of the marriage. The headlines multiplied. Tech mogul stands firm against unfaithful wife. Adrian Whitmore refuses to be taken advantage of. When questioned by reporters, Adrian's attorney released a carefully crafted statement. Mr. Whitmore entered this marriage in good faith, believing in the commitment he and Miss Kane made to each other. Unfortunately, evidence came to light that Miss Kane had not been faithful to those vows. While Mr. Whitmore is deeply hurt, he believes in facing difficult truths rather than living a lie. He wishes Miss Kane well and asks for privacy during this difficult time. The statement was a masterpiece of implication, never directly saying Margot had been unfaithful, just suggesting it heavily enough that everyone filled in the blanks themselves. And when rumors began circulating that Margot was pregnant, Adrian's team was ready. A source close to the situation revealed that Kane claimed to be pregnant, but Whitmore has reason to believe the child is not his. DNA testing is expected to confirm this, though Whitmore has chosen not to publicly humiliate his ex-wife by releasing those results. It was a lie. There had been no DNA testing. There was no pregnancy to test at that point. But the narrative was set. Margot Kane was a woman who'd tried to trap a billionaire, failed, and was now attempting a pregnancy scheme as a last-ditch effort. The internet, that great magnifier of human cruelty, ran with it. Within 48 hours, Margot's name was trending worldwide. The comments were vicious. Gold digger got caught and now she's claiming pregnancy. Classic manipulation. He's smart for getting out. She was obviously using him from the start. Poor guy fell for the oldest trick in the book. At least he figured it out before she could really trap him. Women like this should be exposed. She's disgusting. Someone created a Reddit thread. How Margot Kane almost trapped a billionaire, a case study. It had thousands of upvotes, hundreds of comments dissecting every photo of her and Adrian together, analyzing her expressions for evidence of deception, creating timelines that proved nothing but felt damning. YouTube videos appeared with titles like The Truth About Gold Diggers, featuring relationship experts who'd never met Margot explaining her psychology, her strategy, her manipulation tactics. TikTok trends mocked women who tried to baby trap wealthy men. Margot became shorthand for a type, a warning, cautionary tale. And through it all, she said nothing, released no statements, made no public appearances, simply vanished from the world Adrian had introduced her to. She deleted her social media, changed her phone number, left the apartment she'd been staying at with a friend, disappeared so completely it was like she'd never existed. Adrian told himself this was proof of guilt. Innocent people fought back. Innocent people defended themselves. Her silence must mean she had nothing to say in her defense. He didn't consider that maybe her silence meant she had no platform to speak from, no resources to fight back, no way to combat a narrative backed by unlimited money and a PR machine designed to destroy. 3 weeks after the divorce was finalized, Margot stood in a gas station bathroom staring at 2 pink lines on a pregnancy test. She was living in a women's shelter at that point, sleeping in a room shared with 5 other women, all of them escaping various disasters. Her small backpack contained everything she owned now. 3 changes of clothes, a water bottle, her expired social work certification documents. And now this test. 2 pink lines, 2 lives depending on her, 2 reasons she couldn't fall apart. The woman on the cot next to hers noticed the next morning when Margot couldn't keep down breakfast. First time. It wasn't a question. The woman was older, with kind eyes and scars on her arms that told stories Margot didn't need to hear. First time being homeless. Not my first time being broken. The woman nodded with understanding that came from experience. Difference is, broken can heal. You'll see. But Margot's body had other plans. Morning sickness arrived with vengeance, making it impossible to hide her condition. The shelter coordinator, a steel-spined woman named Ruth, called her into the office. You're pregnant. It wasn't a question. Margot nodded. Father in the picture. No. Child support. No. Ruth studied her for a long moment. You know you have options. Resources. This doesn't have to be your path. It's already my path. Margot's voice was quiet but firm. I'm keeping them. Them. Feels like more than one. I don't know why. Just a feeling. Ruth's expression softened slightly. Then you need to start planning. This place has a 2-month limit. After that, you're on your own. Margot found work at a textile factory where questions weren't asked and paychecks were handed out in cash. The work was punishing. 12-hour shifts operating machinery that turned fabric into cheap clothing destined for discount stores. Her hands developed calluses. Her back ached constantly. Her body swelled with pregnancy while she stood at her station, drinking water when supervisors weren't looking, hiding her growing belly under oversized shirts. The other workers, mostly immigrant women with their own survival stories, watched over her with quiet solidarity. They snuck her extra food from their lunches, covered for her when she had to vomit in the bathroom, didn't ask questions because they understood that some stories were too painful to tell. At 6 months, the ultrasound technician at the free clinic looked up from the screen with surprise. "You're having twins." Margot's breath caught. Twins. 2 sons. Healthy boys. The technician showed her the screen, pointing out 2 distinct heartbeats. 2 separate forms curled together in the darkness of her womb. Both looking good. Strong heartbeats. "Do you want to know the sex?" "Yes." "Boys. You're having 2 boys." Margot left the clinic in a daze, her hands pressed against her belly where Adrian's sons were growing. Sons he didn't know about. Sons he would have denied anyway based on his certainty that she'd been unfaithful. She should have felt anger, should have felt the urge to call him, to demand he face the consequences of his accusations. But she felt only a fierce protective love for these 2 beings who hadn't asked to be born into chaos. That night in her tiny subsidized apartment, 1 bedroom with cracked linoleum and windows that didn't close properly, she named them silently. Caleb and Joshua, prophets who had endured hardship and emerged faithful. She needed that faith now. The birth was lonely. Ruth drove her to the county hospital when contractions started, dropping her off with a quick squeeze of the shoulder. "You're stronger than you think." Margot didn't feel strong. She felt terrified and alone, gripping the bed rails as her body tore itself apart, bringing life into the world. No partner holding her hand. No family in the waiting room. Just her and 2 babies fighting their way into existence. Caleb arrived first, screaming with indignation at being pulled from warmth into fluorescent lights. Joshua followed minutes later, quieter, his eyes seeming to take in everything with solemn observation. Twins. The exhausted nurse placed them both on Margot's chest. "Congratulations, Mama." Margot looked down at their tiny faces, their small fists, their absolute perfection, and felt something inside her shift permanently. These boys would never know abandonment. They would never feel unwanted. She would build them a life from nothing, and it would be enough. It had to be enough. The months that followed were a blur of sleepless nights and relentless forward motion. Margot returned to school, taking night classes online while the twins slept, earning her degree in social work while breastfeeding during lectures, typing papers with 1 hand while rocking a cradle with her foot. The boys grew. Caleb was all smiles and easy laughter, reaching for everything with chubby hands, fascinated by shapes and patterns. Joshua was more thoughtful, his gaze tracking movements, his tiny fingers clutching at fabric and holding on as if understanding that letting go meant falling. Margot talked to them constantly, narrating her life like they could understand. "We're going to the store now. We'll walk because the bus doesn't come for an hour. It's good exercise. Fresh air. See the leaves. Red and gold. Beautiful things are free." She refused bitterness. Some nights, alone after the boys slept, she would feel the weight of what Adrian had thrown away. The family they could have been. The father these boys deserved. But she never spoke his name to them. Never poisoned their minds with her pain. Instead, she told them a story. A different story. Fairy tale. Once there was a king who loved a queen. They built a beautiful kingdom together. But a wicked wizard convinced the king that the queen had betrayed him. And the king believed the lie. So the queen had to leave the kingdom, and she was very sad. But she carried with her the most precious gifts the king had ever given her, even though he didn't know. And she raised those gifts with all the love they both should have shared. What happened to the king? Caleb asked when he was old enough to understand the story. The king lived in his castle alone, wondering if he'd made a terrible mistake. Did he? Joshua's voice was always softer, more measured. Margot smoothed his hair, choosing her words carefully. He made a choice based on fear instead of love. And fear always costs more than people realize. The boys grew into extraordinary children despite the poverty surrounding them. Caleb excelled at anything involving numbers, solving puzzles intended for much older children. his mind working in patterns and sequences that left his teachers astonished. Joshua devoured books, writing stories in cramped handwriting on whatever paper he could find, his observations about people and their motivations eerily perceptive. Margot worked multiple jobs. Social worker by day, teaching community classes in the evening, cleaning offices late at night while the boys did homework in break rooms. She was exhausted always, worn thin, but she never let them see her break. "Why do you work so hard, Mama?" Caleb asked once, watching her ice her swollen feet. "Because you two are worth every single tired bone in my body." The king in the story, Joshua said quietly. "Does he ever find out about the gifts?" Margot met her son's eyes, seeing in them a reflection of the man who'd thrown her away. "I don't know, baby. Some stories don't have endings yet." But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. Adrian Whitmore had no idea what he'd lost. And if life had any justice, he would spend the rest of his days drowning in that ignorance. The universe, however, had different plans. Plans written in genetic code, waiting in the shadows, counting down to a moment when the past and present would collide with the force of two young hearts simultaneously beginning to fail. Take a second and imagine this. You're working 3 jobs, raising twins alone in an apartment where the windows don't close and the heat barely works. And the entire world thinks you're a liar, a gold digger, a woman who tried to trap a billionaire and failed. Could you survive that with your sanity intact? Could you raise children to be kind and brilliant despite poverty and stigma? Margot Kane did exactly that. For 8 years, she did exactly that. If her strength is inspiring you right now, if you're thinking about the single parents in your life who do this every day, show some love. Hit that like button. Drop a comment telling me if you think she should have told Adrian about the twins when they were born. Should she have fought back publicly? I want to know what you think. And subscribe, because what happens next, the moment those 8 years of careful survival get shattered by a diagnosis neither of them saw coming, that's when this story really begins. That's when the internet finally starts asking the right questions. While Margot was building a life from nothing, Adrian Whitmore was discovering that everything meant nothing. His mansion, all 32 rooms of it, became a mausoleum. He lived in maybe 5 rooms. The rest gathered dust behind closed doors that no one opened. The cleaning service came weekly, moving through the space like ghosts, careful not to disturb anything in the master bedroom, especially not the reading chair by the window. It had been Margot's chair. She'd spent mornings there with her coffee and whatever book had caught her attention, sunlight turning her skin to bronze, her expressions shifting with the words she read. Adrian had never moved it, never allowed anyone to clean it. Sometimes he'd find himself standing in the doorway at dawn, half expecting to see her there, feet tucked under her, that slight smile she got when she read something beautiful. But the chair stayed empty. His sister Diane was the only person who regularly invaded his isolation. She arrived unannounced, letting herself in with the key he'd foolishly given her. "You look like death. Good morning to you too." She sat down uninvited, studying him with the brutal honesty only siblings possess. "When was the last time you ate a real meal? Or slept for more than a few hours? Or left this tomb you've built for yourself?" "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You haven't been fine since you threw away the best thing that ever happened to you." Adrian's jaw tightened. "I don't want to discuss this." "Of course you don't. Because discussing it would mean admitting you were wrong." Diane leaned forward, her voice sharp. "Did you ever find proof, Adrian? After all these years, did you ever actually confirm she was unfaithful?" "The photos were circumstantial at best. You never found receipts for hotel rooms. Never found love letters. Never found a single concrete piece of evidence because there wasn't any to find. You don't know that. Neither do you. But you destroyed your marriage anyway." He wanted to argue, but the words died in his throat because Diane was right. Over the years, in moments of terrible clarity, Adrian had questioned everything. Had hired investigators long after the divorce was final, trying to find something, anything that would justify what he'd done. They'd found nothing. Malcolm, the man in the photos, was exactly what Margot had claimed. A colleague, a social worker, happily married with 3 children. No history of affairs. No connection to Margot beyond professional collaboration on shelter projects. The anonymous letters had stopped after the divorce. The photographer had never been identified. Adrian had traced the origin of the photos to a disposable email address that led nowhere. And slowly, over months that turned into years, a horrifying possibility had taken root. He'd been played. Someone had wanted to destroy his marriage, and he'd handed them the weapon. Lawrence. Adrian had confronted his former business partner after discovering financial irregularities. After realizing that the divorce had freed up Adrian's time and attention, had made him more focused on the company, more pliable to Lawrence's suggestions. Did you send those photos? Lawrence had smiled, cold and calculating. Does it matter now? You're free of her. You can focus on what's important. Adrian had severed all ties that day, but the damage was permanent. Margot was gone, and he had no idea where. He'd tried finding her, hired the best investigators money could buy, but Margot Kane had vanished completely, leaving no trail, no forwarding address, nothing. It was as if she'd been erased from existence. The videos remained on his phone, though. He'd watch them late at night, whiskey burning his throat, her laughter filling the empty study. Their wedding, their honeymoon, mundane moments of her cooking breakfast, making terrible jokes, dancing in the kitchen to music only she could hear. You're watching them again, Diane said, recognizing the hollow look in his eyes. I can't help it. Then do something about it. Hire better investigators. Put up billboards. Something other than slowly dying in this house. What's the point? Even if I found her, what would I say? Sorry I ruined your life based on lies. Sorry I threw you away like trash. She'd be right to spit in my face. Maybe, but at least you'd have tried. Adrian said nothing, because the truth was more pathetic than he wanted to admit. He was afraid. Afraid of confirmation that she'd moved on, found happiness, built a life that didn't include him. Afraid of seeing in her eyes the complete absence of feeling, which would be worse than hatred. So he stayed in his mansion, surrounded by wealth that meant nothing, attending meetings out of habit, making decisions that affected thousands while unable to manage his own existence. You didn't lose her, Diane said, standing to leave. That would imply it was beyond your control. You threw her away, Adrian. You chose pride over trust. That's worse than loss. That's voluntary destruction. After she left, Adrian walked through the mansion, really seeing it for the first time in years. The dining room where they'd never eaten meals. Too formal, too cold. The living room with furniture no one sat on. The kitchen that prepared food for one person in a space designed for families. His footsteps echoed on marble floors. This wasn't a home. It was a monument to absence. A shrine to everything he'd destroyed. 8 years passed like this. Margot raising brilliant sons who looked exactly like their father. Adrian living in expensive emptiness. Too proud to admit his mistake. Too afraid to face the consequences. But biology doesn't care about pride or fear. Biology just waits. The gymnasium smelled like teenage sweat and ambition. Joshua Kane moved down the court with fluid grace, his movements economical and purposeful. Community basketball wasn't about competition for him. It was about the rhythm, the way the game forced him into the present moment, away from the stories constantly running through his head. Caleb watched from the bleachers, simultaneously timing his brother's sprints and calculating optimal angles for three-point shots. His notebook was filled with equations and observations, transforming the game into mathematics, finding patterns in chaos. Margot sat beside him, proud and tired, having just finished an overnight shift at the crisis center. Watching her sons had become her meditation. These two extraordinary young men who'd grown from nothing into everything. The ball arced toward Joshua. He caught it mid-stride, pivoted, and then stopped. Just stopped. His hand went to his chest. His face changed. The ball dropped from his fingers, bouncing away, forgotten as Joshua's knees buckled. Margot was moving before he hit the ground, her mother's instinct faster than thought. She reached him as he collapsed, his body convulsing, his eyes rolling back. Someone call an ambulance. Her voice cut through the sudden chaos, steady despite the terror clawing at her throat. Caleb was already on his phone, his hands shaking but his voice clear, rattling off their location and his brother's symptoms to the emergency operator. The ambulance arrived in what felt like both seconds and centuries. Paramedics swarmed Joshua, asking questions Margot answered on autopilot while her mind screamed denials. This wasn't happening. Her son was healthy. Her son was strong. This was a mistake, an anomaly, something explainable and fixable. The hospital emergency room was controlled pandemonium. Doctors barked orders. Machines beeped urgently. Joshua was wheeled away behind swinging doors that closed in Margot's face, separating her from her son. And she felt a primal rage at barriers, at helplessness, at the universe for daring to threaten her child. Caleb stood beside her, silent, his mind already racing through possibilities, calculating odds he didn't want to face. "Are you his mother?" A doctor appeared, young but tired, wearing the expression medical professionals adopt when delivering bad news. "Yes." "What's wrong with my son?" "We've stabilized him, but I need to run some tests." "Has he ever had chest pains, shortness of breath, dizzy spells?" "No, nothing. He's healthy. He's an athlete." The doctor nodded, but his eyes said he'd heard that before. "I'll have more information soon. But Mrs. Kane, I need you to prepare yourself. His heart rhythm is severely irregular. We're looking at something significant." The tests took hours. Margot and Caleb sat in a waiting room where time moved differently, stretching and contracting, where every opening door might bring salvation or devastation. Finally, a cardiologist appeared, older with gray hair and eyes that had seen too much death. He sat down, which was never a good sign. "Your son has hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. It's a genetic condition where the heart muscle becomes abnormally thick, making it harder for the heart to pump blood. In Joshua's case, it's advanced. He's in acute heart failure." The words landed like physical blows. Margot's hand found Caleb's, gripping tight. "What does that mean? Treatment, surgery, what?" "It means his heart is working at a fraction of normal capacity and deteriorating rapidly. Standard treatments aren't options here because of the specific genetic markers involved. We need to look at cellular therapy, stem cell transplantation from a biological parent to essentially rebuild the damaged tissue." Margot processed this, her medical training kicking in despite her panic. "My cells. Test mine." "We will, but there's something else." The cardiologist looked at Caleb. "This condition is hereditary. Given that you're his twin, there's a very high probability you have it too." Caleb's face went pale. "I feel fine. For now. But if you have the same genetic markers, your heart is likely in the early stages of the same deterioration. We need to test you immediately." The next hours became a nightmare of needles and scans. Caleb was poked, prodded, imaged, his body scrutinized for the invisible killer hiding in his genetic code. The results confirmed everyone's fears. Both twins carried the mutation. Both were dying, just at different speeds. Margot's test results came back after an agonizing wait. The cardiologist's face told her everything before he spoke. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Kane. Your cells aren't compatible. There's a chromosomal mismatch that makes you unsuitable as a donor. It's rare, but it happens. Then find another donor. There must be a registry, someone compatible. The genetic markers are too specific. They inherited this from their father. We need his cells. The DNA match has to be nearly exact for this therapy to work." The room tilted. Margot heard the words but couldn't process their implications. Their biological father. Is he available? Willing to be tested? Caleb and Joshua, lying in adjacent beds in the ICU, looked at their mother with questions they'd never asked but always wondered. "We have a father." Joshua's voice was weak, confused. "You always said he was gone," Caleb added. "That he left before we were born." Margot had never lied to her sons, only omitted the parts too painful to explain. And now those omissions had become a crisis. "Your father doesn't know you exist. He never knew I was pregnant. We separated before I found out. Then find him." Joshua's monitor beeped urgently, his stress affecting his already compromised heart. "Please, Mama. I don't want to die." Those words shattered something fundamental in Margot. her son asking for life from a man who'd destroyed hers. That night, after the boys finally slept under sedation, Margot sat in the hospital chapel. Empty pews, dim lighting, the weight of an impossible choice. She'd sworn she would never contact Adrian Whitmore again. Had built a life specifically to avoid ever needing him. Had raised 2 sons to be whole without a father because fathers could be poison, could be absence, could be the thing that ruins you. But now those sons were dying, and their cure lay in the genetics of the man who'd thrown her away like garbage. Her phone sat in her lap, his number still stored after all these years. Kept not out of hope, but out of some masochistic need to remember what not to believe in. Her finger hovered over the call button. If she made this call, Adrian would learn about the sons he'd never known. He would have power over their survival. He could refuse, could demand things, could insert himself into the life she'd carefully constructed without him. But if she didn't make this call, her sons would die. And all her pride, all her justified anger, all her carefully guarded independence would mean nothing if Caleb and Joshua weren't alive to benefit from it. Margot pressed the button before she could reconsider. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. She almost hung up, almost chickened out, almost chose pride over her children's lives. Then a voice answered, unchanged by time, familiar as her own heartbeat. Hello, and we're back to where we started. That 3 a.m. call that would change everything. After hanging up with Margot, Adrian stood in his penthouse, phone still in his hand, her words echoing in the silence. You have sons. Twins. They're 17 and they're dying. He called his assistant at home, waking him. I need a driver. Now. City General Hospital. It's an emergency. Sir, it's nearly midnight. Now. While waiting, Adrian paced, his mind reeling. Sons. Twins. 17 years old, nearly adults, and he'd missed everything. First words, first steps, first days of school, every birthday, every milestone. Gone. Stolen by his own stupidity. And they were dying. His children, whom he'd never held, never met, were dying from a genetic condition he'd given them. His fault twice over. First for the DNA, second for not being there to notice symptoms, to get early treatment, to do whatever fathers are supposed to do. The driver arrived. Adrian climbed into the back seat of a luxury sedan, giving the address, watching the mansion recede through the rear window. For years he'd been dying slowly in that house. Now he was rushing to a hospital to possibly die quickly, saving children who didn't know him. The city passed in a blur of lights. Adrian's hands shook. He tried calling Margot back, but she didn't answer. He typed and deleted a dozen text messages, each one sounding more pathetic than the last. Can you go faster? He asked the driver. Sir, I'm already 10 over the limit. I don't care. Go faster. They arrived at City General just after 1 in the morning. Adrian burst through the main entrance, wild-eyed and disheveled, approaching the information desk. Dr. Reeves, cardiology. I was told to ask for him. The receptionist made a call. Moments later, a tired-looking doctor appeared. Mr. Whitmore. Yes, I'm here about my sons. Saying it out loud made it real. Dr. Reeves nodded, leading him through corridors that smelled like antiseptic and fear. I've explained the situation to Miss Kane. The procedure is complex. We'll need to extract bone marrow stem cells from you, culture them, and transplant them into both boys. The extraction itself is painful, but relatively safe. However, there are risks. Infection, anesthetic complications, and your immune system will be compromised for months afterward. I don't care about risks. They reached the ICU. Through a window, Adrian saw them for the first time. 2 young men, nearly adults, lying in adjacent beds. Even unconscious, even with tubes and monitors obscuring their features, Adrian recognized himself in them. The shape of their faces, the set of their shoulders. Genetic echoes impossible to deny. That's Caleb on the left. Dr. Reeves said quietly. He's the early stage. That's Joshua on the right. He's critical. Adrian's legs nearly gave out. His sons. His children. Real and dying and completely unknown to him. A woman stood between the beds, one hand on each boy's arm, Even from behind, even after 8 years, Adrian recognized Margot. She was thinner, worn down by time and hardship, but unmistakably herself. She turned and their eyes met through the glass. The hatred there nearly stopped his heart a second time. Pure, justified, burning hatred mixed with desperation. She hated him, but she needed him. Both truths existed simultaneously, and Adrian understood he would spend the rest of his life trying to bridge that impossible distance. Dr. Reeves moved toward the door, but Margot stepped out first, blocking Adrian's path. You can look, but you don't touch. You don't speak to them. They're unconscious anyway, but even if they weren't, you have no right to their attention yet. Margot, I'm so sorry. Don't. She held up a hand. I don't have the capacity for your apologies right now. My sons are dying. You're here to stop that. Everything else is irrelevant. Can I at least see them closer? She studied him with eyes that had once looked at him with love and now saw only the man who destroyed her. Finally, she stepped aside. Adrian entered the ICU on shaking legs. Up close, the resemblance was even more striking. Caleb had Margot's expressions, but his features were Adrian's. Joshua looked like a younger version of Adrian himself, down to the way his hair fell across his forehead. They're beautiful, Adrian whispered. They're good, Margot corrected. Beautiful is superficial. They're good human beings, despite having a father who doesn't know them and a mother who worked 3 jobs to keep them fed. They're kind and brilliant and humble, and if you help save them, you'll spend the rest of your life trying to deserve them. Adrian reached out, almost touching Joshua's hand, then stopped, remembering Margot's prohibition. I want to know everything. What they like, what they dream about, their favorite foods, everything I missed. You missed everything. Literally everything. And you don't get to download 18 years in one conversation. If they survive, if they choose to know you, then maybe you'll earn those stories. But not from me. Never from me. Dr. Reeves returned with paperwork. Mr. Whitmore, we need to start the testing immediately. Time is critical. Adrian nodded, unable to look away from his sons. Whatever you need. Whatever it takes. As they led him away for blood work and genetic screening, Adrian looked back once. Margot had returned to her position between the beds, a warrior standing guard over her children, protecting them even from their own father. And Adrian understood with terrible clarity he wasn't here as a parent. He wasn't here as someone with rights or claims. He was here as a genetic resource, a biological tool. And whether he ever became anything more would depend on 2 boys who didn't know him and 1 woman who had every reason to make sure they never did. The testing took hours. Blood draws, genetic analysis, compatibility screenings. Adrian sat in examination rooms answering questions about family medical history he barely knew, watching technicians handle vials of his blood like they contained answers to impossible questions. His phone buzzed constantly. His assistant, his board members, business associates wondering where he was. He ignored them all. Around 4 in the morning, Dr. Reeves appeared with preliminary results. The genetic markers match. You're their biological father, no question. And the initial compatibility looks excellent. We can likely proceed with extraction within 24 hours if you consent. I consent. Absolutely. When can I see them again? They'll be sedated for several more hours. Mr. Whitmore, I need to be clear about something. This procedure will be extremely painful for you. The recovery will take months. Your immune system will be compromised, making you vulnerable to infections that could be life-threatening. Are you certain you want to proceed? They're my sons. Adrian's voice was firm. I missed 18 years of their lives because I was a coward and a fool. If I can give them more years, more life, more future, why wouldn't I risk everything for that? Dr. Reeves nodded, something like respect in his eyes. I'll schedule the procedure. After the doctor left, Adrian sat alone in a recovery room, staring at his hands. These hands that had signed divorce papers, that had thrown accusations, that had pushed away the best thing in his life. Now these same hands might save his children. It wasn't redemption. It wasn't even close. But it was something. His phone rang. Diane, where are you? Your assistant is panicking because you disappeared in the middle of the night. I'm at a hospital. Are you hurt? What happened? I have sons, Diane. 18-year-old twin sons. And they're dying. Silence. Then, quietly, "Oh, Adrian, what did you do? Everything wrong. And now I'm trying to do one thing right." He told her everything. The phone call, Margot's voice, the children he denied, the genetic condition, all of it. When he finished, Diane was crying. "I believed you. For 8 years I told people you'd done the right thing, that you'd stood firm against manipulation. And all that time I had nephews I didn't know. Adrian, how could you?" He had no answer, because the truth was simple and damning. He'd been scared, selfish, and his lawyers had made abandonment seem reasonable. "I'm getting tested for bone marrow donation. If I'm a match, they'll do the extraction tomorrow. And if you're not, then I'll find another way. But Diane, they look exactly like me. Exactly. There's no question they're mine. Then fix this. Whatever it takes. Those are my nephews and they're sick. Nothing else matters." After hanging up, Adrian tried to sleep but couldn't. He walked the hospital corridors, watching nurses change shifts, watching the city wake up through windows, watching life continue while his own life fractured and reformed into something unrecognizable. Around 6 a.m., he returned to the ICU. Margot was still there, now sitting in a chair between the beds, her head bowed, either sleeping or praying. She looked up when he entered. Her eyes were red, exhausted, but still sharp with protective fury. "You should go home. Get some rest." "I'm not leaving them. Neither am I." They sat in silence, these two people who'd once promised forever, now strangers bound only by the children between them. "I know I can't fix what I did," Adrian finally said. "I know sorry isn't enough. But Margot, I need you to understand something. When I accused you, when I divorced you, I genuinely believed the lies. I'm not saying that makes it better. I'm just saying I wasn't trying to be cruel. I was trying to protect myself from what I thought was betrayal. You never even considered that you might be wrong. You just believed the worst of me and acted on it. I know. You destroyed me based on assumption. Not proof. Not evidence. Just your pride telling you that you couldn't possibly have been fooled. I know. And now our sons are paying for your pride with their lives." The accusation hung between them, true and devastating. "If I could go back," Adrian said quietly, "if I could undo any of it. But you can't. Time only moves forward. And all we have is now." She looked at their sons. These two lives they created together in love and lost in anger. "So what are you going to do now, Adrian? Are you going to save them and disappear? Are you going to play hero for the cameras and then go back to your mansion? Or are you actually going to try to be their father?" "I want to be their father. Really be it. Not just visits or child support, but actual parenting. That's not your decision alone. I know, but I'm telling you my intention." "Why now after 18 years of nothing?" "Because I was wrong. Because they're mine. Because watching them face this has made me understand what actually matters." He turned to face her fully. "And Margot, because you were right about everything. 18 years ago, you were telling the truth and I destroyed you for it. I can't fix that. But I can show up now. I can be present for whatever time they'll give me. That's not enough. I know. But it's all I have to offer." A nurse entered, checking the boy's vitals, adjusting medications. Normal morning routines in abnormal circumstances. After she left, Margot spoke again, her voice softer but no less fierce. "They're gonna ask about you. When they wake up, when they understand what's happening, they're gonna want to know why you weren't there before. What should I tell them? The truth. That you made a terrible mistake. That you believed a lie and it cost all of us 18 years. Don't make excuses. Don't blame anyone else. Just own what you did. And if they hate me, then you'll have earned that too." Caleb woke first around 8 in the morning. His eyes opened slowly, adjusting to the fluorescent lights, taking in the hospital room, the machines, his brother in the next bed. "Mom." Margot was at his side instantly. "I'm here, baby. Right here. What's wrong with me? You have a heart condition. The same one Joshua has. We're gonna fix it, but it's serious." Caleb processed this with the analytical mind that made him extraordinary. "Genetic. Yes. From him. Our father." It wasn't really a question, but Margot nodded. Caleb's eyes found Adrian, standing awkwardly near the door, trying to be present without intruding. Is that him? Yes. They looked at each other, father and son, for the first time with both conscious. Caleb studied Adrian with the same intensity he brought to mathematical problems, analyzing, calculating, drawing conclusions. You look like us, or we look like you. Adrian moved closer, his heart hammering. You look like yourselves. But yes, there's definitely a resemblance. Mom says you didn't know about us. I didn't, and that's my fault, not hers. I should have known. I should have been there. Why weren't you? Because I made a terrible mistake. I accused your mother of something she didn't do, and instead of believing her when she told me the truth, I believed lies. I destroyed our marriage, and I never knew she was pregnant. Caleb absorbed this, his expression unreadable. Are you here to help us? If I can. If my cells are compatible, I'll donate whatever you need. And after, if we survive, will you stay? The question was direct, challenging. This 17-year-old who'd grown up without a father was asking for promises Adrian had no right to make. But he answered honestly, if you'll let me, I want to know you, both of you. I want to try to be your father, even though I have no idea how and I'll probably mess it up constantly. Caleb almost smiled. At least you're honest about being incompetent. Despite everything, Adrian laughed. That's the only thing I can promise. Absolute honesty from here on out. Joshua woke an hour later, his condition more fragile but his mind just as sharp. He listened as Margot and Adrian explained everything again, his thoughtful eyes moving between his parents, reading the tension and history and complicated emotion. This is like one of my stories, he said quietly. The kind where everything seems impossible but somehow it has to work out. This isn't a story, Margot said gently. This is real life. And real life doesn't always work out. But sometimes it does. Joshua looked at Adrian. Do you love her? Our mom? The question caught everyone off guard. Margot's expression hardened, preparing to shut down this line of inquiry. But Adrian answered truthfully. I never stopped loving her. Even when I thought I hated her, even when I was destroying her, somewhere underneath all the anger and pride, I never stopped. That's not the same as being in love, Joshua observed. You can love someone and still hurt them. You're right. And I did hurt her. Badly. So badly that she may never forgive me, and I wouldn't blame her. Will you hurt us too? I hope not. But I'm human, and humans make mistakes. All I can promise is that if I do hurt you, it won't be on purpose, and I'll own it and try to fix it. Joshua nodded slowly. Okay, that's fair. Okay. The agreement was tentative, fragile, but real. Two sons willing to give their father a chance he hadn't earned but desperately needed. Pause for a second. Think about what's happening here. Two teenage boys who've never known their father are being asked to trust him with their lives. Literally. They're dying, and the man who denied their existence is their only hope. Would you be able to forgive in that situation? Would you be able to let go of 18 years of abandonment for a chance at survival? Drop a comment and let me know. Could you do what these boys are doing? Could you show that kind of grace? And if this story is gripping you, if you're invested in whether Adrian can actually change, hit that subscribe button. Because what happens next, when the internet finds out the truth, when the narrative that destroyed Margot starts to flip, that's when things get really intense. The extraction procedure was scheduled for the following evening. 24 hours for Adrian to prepare, for the doctors to finalize protocols, for everyone to come to terms with what was about to happen. Adrian spent that time with his sons. Awkward at first, not knowing what to say or how to bridge 18 years in hours. But the boys made it easier. They asked questions, told stories, shared their lives in small pieces. Caleb explained his fascination with mathematics, how he saw the world in patterns and sequences. Joshua shared his love of writing, pulling up stories on his phone that Adrian read with growing amazement. You wrote this. This is incredible. It's just practice. I want to study literature in college. He paused. If I make it to college. You'll make it, Adrian said firmly. You're going to make it and you're going to write novels and I'm going to be that annoying dad who tells everyone my son is a published author. Annoying dad. Caleb raised an eyebrow. You're already planning dad behaviors. I have 18 years to make up for. I'm going to be intensely annoying. Despite everything, the boys laughed, and Adrian felt something shift in his chest. This was what he'd missed. This casual intimacy. This ordinary magic of being with your children. Margot watched from the corner, her expression complex. Pain at what they'd all lost. Relief that her sons were connecting with their father. Fear that this would all fall apart. Adrian caught her eye, and for just a moment, the hatred softened into something else. Not forgiveness, not even close, but maybe the beginning of possibility. That afternoon, someone leaked Adrian's presence at the hospital. A nurse, a visitor, someone with a phone and access to social media. The story exploded across the internet. Billionaire Adrian Whitmore spotted at hospital with woman and children from old paternity scandal. Within hours, news vans surrounded the hospital. Reporters camped at entrances. Cameras tried to peer through windows. The old story resurfaced. All the articles about gold digger Margot Kane. All the accusations. All the certainty that she'd been lying. But this time, the comments were different. Wait, if he's at the hospital with them, does that mean they're actually his? Those kids look exactly like him. How did we miss this 8 years ago? Did he ever actually prove they weren't his? Or did we just believe him because he's rich? The narrative was shifting, tilting, people starting to ask questions they should have asked years ago. Adrian's PR team arrived at the hospital in full crisis mode. Vanessa Friedman, his director of communications, found him in the ICU waiting area. We need to make a statement. Control this before it spirals. No statements. Adrian, the internet is tearing you apart. Your stock prices are dropping. Sponsors are calling. We need damage control. I don't care. You should care. This could destroy your company. My company means nothing if my sons die. So no. No statements. No spin. No carefully crafted narratives. For once in my life, I'm just going to tell the truth and let the chips fall. Vanessa stared at him like he'd lost his mind. The truth is that you denied these children for 18 years. The truth is career suicide. Then I guess I'm committing career suicide. He walked away, leaving his team behind, returning to his sons who mattered more than any empire he built. The DNA results came back that evening, official and undeniable. Dr. Reeves called Adrian and Margot into his office. The tests confirm with 99.99% certainty that you are the biological father of Caleb and Joshua Kane. Adrian closed his eyes, the weight of it settling. And the compatibility. Excellent. You're a near-perfect match for both boys. We can proceed with the extraction tomorrow as planned. After the doctor left, Adrian and Margot sat in the quiet office. 18 years, Margot said. 18 years you were certain I was lying. And you were wrong the entire time. I know. Do you? Do you really understand what you did? You didn't just leave me. You made the world hate me. You made strangers send me death threats. You made it impossible for me to work, to exist, to do anything without being labeled a liar and a gold digger. Her voice broke. I gave birth to your sons alone in a county hospital. I worked 3 jobs to keep them fed. I watched them grow up brilliant and kind despite poverty. And you were in your mansion, convinced you dodged a bullet. I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't give me back 18 years. Sorry doesn't erase the grocery store video or the millions of people who think I'm trash. Sorry doesn't fix anything. I know, but it's all I have. That and my bone marrow. And whatever years I have left to try to be better. Margot stood, exhausted and furious and trapped by circumstances. Save them. That's all I'm asking. Save our sons and then we'll figure out what comes next. The bone marrow extraction happened the next evening. They took Adrian to a surgical suite, explained the procedure again, had him sign waivers acknowledging the risks. He signed without reading. They anesthetized him, and as he went under, his last conscious thought was a prayer to a God he'd stopped believing in years ago. Let me live long enough to save them. Whatever happens after is fine. Just let me save them. The procedure was exactly as painful as they'd warned. Adrian woke hours later feeling like his bones had been hollowed out with rusty spoons. Every movement sent shockwaves of pain through his body. But the nurse smiled when she checked his vitals. The extraction was successful. We got excellent samples. They're preparing the cells for transplant now. My sons, both scheduled for transplant tomorrow. You should rest. Recovery is going to be difficult. But Adrian couldn't rest. Despite the pain, despite his compromised condition, he needed to see them. He made his way slowly to the ICU, every step agony, to find Caleb and Joshua being prepped for their procedures. Dad. Joshua saw him first, and Adrian's heart stuttered at the word. Dad. This boy who barely knew him was calling him Dad. You look terrible, Caleb observed. Feel worse, but it's worth it. He approached their beds carefully. Tomorrow they're going to take my cells and put them in you. And if everything works, if biology cooperates, you're going to get better. And if it doesn't work, Joshua asked quietly, then we try something else. We keep trying until something works. You're not going anywhere. I just found you. You're not going anywhere. Margot entered, stopping short when she saw Adrian out of bed. You should be resting. I needed to see them. She studied him, this man who destroyed her, now barely able to stand but refusing to leave their children. Just this once, her voice softened slightly. Just this once, your stubborn refusal to listen to reason is working in your favor. The transplants happened the next day. Both boys were prepped, scared but trying to be brave. They held hands as they were wheeled to separate operating rooms. It'll be okay, Iris told her brother. We're tough. The toughest, Joshua agreed. Adrian and Margot waited together. Hours of surgery, of doctors working to transplant his cells into his children's bodies, of hoping biology would cooperate. The tension between them was still sharp, but shared terror created a temporary truce. If this works, Adrian said quietly, if they survive, I want to be part of their lives. Really part of it. Not just visits or financial support, but actual parenting. That's not your decision alone. I know, but I'm telling you what I want. Why now? Because I was wrong about everything. Because they're extraordinary and I want to know them. Because you raised them alone and you shouldn't have to keep doing that. He looked at her. And because maybe, if I show up every day, if I prove I'm not going anywhere, someday you might trust me enough to let me try. Trust you. She laughed bitterly. Adrian, you destroyed my ability to trust anyone. You taught me that love is conditional and promises are worthless. Why would I ever trust you again? I don't know, but I'm going to try to earn it anyway. They sat in silence after that, waiting. Finally, Dr. Reeves emerged, tired but smiling. The transplants took, both of them. They're stable and early signs suggest their bodies are accepting the donations. It's going to be a long recovery, months of monitoring and treatment, but they have a real chance now. Margot's knees buckled. Adrian caught her instinctively. For just a moment she let him, her body sagging with relief, before pulling away. Can I see them? Once they're in recovery, they'll be sedated for a few more hours. After the doctor left, Margot sat hard in a waiting room chair, her hands shaking, adrenaline finally fading. They're going to live, she whispered. They're actually going to live. Because of you. Adrian sat beside her, careful to maintain distance. You're the one who fought for this, who contacted me even though it must have felt impossible. You saved them, Margot. We saved them. Together. She looked at him with eyes that held 18 years of pain. Even if we can't be anything else, even if we hate each other forever, we did this one thing right.